Oh, don't do that. Don't do it. LinkedIn I check once every 3 months, and Facebook I check every 6 months. There's a reason for that. I get invited to a lot of Oh, Blazor. Okay, so I've done free systems.
Yeah, it's too late now. It's a hard job, but halfway, so it's better.
Sort of, they've just pulled out the Blazor.
I work as a team leader at BizSpain, startup, payment solutions.
And that's talked about.
I'm a business developer.
I know, I've seen your videos. Yeah. But, so I've got a question, what's Telstra Purple? Is it Purple?
I've only been professional, so this is 2 or 3 years. So there's a whole lot of these acquisitions. I mean, it's as deep as what it goes. Reporting stuff.
I'd love to hear about reporting.
Yeah.
We've been on.
So you're from one of the early companies?
Yeah, right.
Redify.
We need to be exploring it. Something I'd like to learn a bit more about.
Yeah. It's certainly in a lot of businesses as well.
Yeah, because I've never heard of Telstra Purple before this video that you guys put out. And this guy, it's heaps of fun on video. And I tried to look at your blog, like, it's not because you moved from one to another.
I guess a lot of them leave too.
You had a blog somewhere else like before, and then you said I'm moving to That was where?
It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's what this might be a bit dodgy. It's like psychic medium.
Purely what they're doing,
what's
what
this?
they're doing.
What's this?
It'll take kind of a step back.
But I think you're a
Data
little
and
bit
try to start making data-driven decisions. That's where that can really add some value as well. But especially in startups,
you tell me your descriptions go down in
based on
the
your data.
Yeah.
You're relying on skills and that's right.
So you just want
Some of you know, some using Power BI. For all intents and purposes.
that's a good.
Yeah, it's also a big table.
Every day.
Excel.
How do you get that food?
Easy to use.
I have the appointment afterwards. So here I am.
I did the electronic engineering studies in Denmark, and my book was written by Darren. So, I mean, and the guy, the code was directly, and Denmark where he was, like the engineering course, I never got to see him meeting, but I was like, oh shit, I'm using C++ from the guys himself. And, but the thing is, Adelaide and Pascal, they're really into that language stuff. But then I tried to figure it out the other day. I think, what can I do to make C++ make it a cool module or a library, and then they say go in, run this library, and this is a new feature. Go from that to what we've got now. CSS, Bootstrap, whatever it is.
It does
Type in a word, you can type a CSS script. I lose track.
A little bit expensive. It's called Power BI Premium. That's what it is. So you utilize the download.
Have you got a card? You can get it out.
You can write it. So Power BI tool is very good if you just want to drag and drop stuff. Use no code at all.
All right, everybody, we might make a start, and I think there's still a few more people coming, but that's okay. I'll do the intro bit first, and then get you guys to come up. My name's David. Sort of help organise the .NET User Group. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. So we're up here, but for the rest of the year we're going to be back downstairs, down on level 1 again. But I think there's something else happening. I wonder if it's graduations or something happening in the uni at the moment.
Graduations.
It is graduations. Seem to be always these people, students that were actually quite well dressed for a change. So that was my guess. Anyway, we're on Meetup, and We're also got an email, we're on Facebook and Twitter, so great to have you sort of follow us and also promote what the group is doing. We tend to meet second Wednesday of every month, and this month is no exception. Next month, we're hoping to have a couple of speakers. We've got James Turner, who's a local developer, doing a talk on .NET performance, and Srinivas, I'm not sure exactly how to say his name, is going to do a talk on sort of introducing the language Rust. Okay. I'm aware of the language Rust. It's not a .NET language, but I just thought that's something I'd be interested to learn a bit more about, so invited him along to speak about that. In June, we've got Paul Usher coming along. I don't know exactly what he's going to talk about, and I'm not sure, come on guys, if he's going to be here or if he's going to be speaking to us from Brisbane, but looking forward to that as well. Come in and grab a seat. Okay. Doing our What's New segment, and actually while everyone's coming in, it's just a reminder that if you didn't check in, make sure you do check in with your QR code or sign on the list. We are meeting at the uni, which doesn't need to do that, but because we're not part of the uni, we should be doing that. So thanks for doing that. VS Code, new version came out about a week ago, and there's a minor update already with some nice new features. Some improved accessibility, which is good. Some new icons if you're on Mac OS. Some nice other things there. Anyone doing VS Code on Raspberry Pi? I'm not either, but if you were, then it looks like you can, so that's good. There's some updates came out overnight for Visual Studio. Just a minor update for 16.9, just some bug and security fixes there. So that's always nice to get. The preview, that hasn't changed since last month, so the 6.10 preview 1, I think is still the current preview. So if you want to have a look at what's coming, there's some nice features there. You can run them side by side and sort of try out the new stuff. If it doesn't work, then just jump back to the regular version of the VS. And .NET Core, actually probably shouldn't call it .NET Core anymore because it's just .NET. So there was a new preview of .NET 6 that came out last week. So that's continuing to sort of rev out new features, and expect that to ship later this year. There was some sort of minor updates for .NET Core 3.1 and 2.1, and yeah, if you've got any stuff running on 2.1, then that's going to stop being serviced as of August, so think about moving that up to 3.1 or even newer than that. And there was a minor update for .NET 5 as well that came out last week too, or a week and a half ago. Just a reminder that Microsoft are promoting the 30 Days to Learn campaign at the moment. Basically, if you work through one of the learning paths on the Microsoft Docs site, then you get a discount on doing a certification. So there's some good material there, and a lot of it's basically free by and large. A lot of the Azure stuff, they'll spin you up a sandbox that you can try stuff out in and work through the different exercises, and then it sort of disappears after that. So it's really quite well designed. Big plug for Encode Talent. Simon and Katrina aren't actually here yet, but I'm expecting them because they're supplying the food at the end of the talk. Maybe they're off making the subways at the moment, I'm not sure. Anyway, we do thank them for supporting the group, and they, in a tangible way, they help subsidise the cost of subways or pizzas in the past, and do have a chat to them if you're looking to change where you're working, or if you're looking to hire more people as well. They'd be good people to talk to. I hope they're not in the wrong place. That would be awkward, wouldn't it? Just a plug for the Heaps Good Slack. So Heaps Good Dev is a Slack group for Adelaide and South Australian developers. a lot of people in this room are already on that Slack group, but if you're not, then great to invite you to be a part of that. It's a really helpful and positive online community, so a lot of the conversations that you might have had here, they'll sort of continue on in the Slack group as well, so it'd be good to be a part of that. There's other user groups who are involved in that as well, so it's not just .NET, there's the front end and other developer user groups based in Adelaide, so it's good to find out what else is happening in the developer scene. And we have a YouTube channel, and apparently we've got a live YouTube streaming right now, even, maybe. Speaking of Simon, here's Simon.
Trying to work out how to use a door.
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome. Yeah, so we've got some of our recordings of our previous meetings there. I know we're still working on last month's. It seems to be a month of hardware issues. Sort of, I think Stephen's computer died and my laptop's just hanging in there by its teeth at the moment. But yeah, so if you do want to catch up with any of the talks we've done in the past, then jump over there. Definitely love some more subscribers. I think if you get over 100, then you can get to rename your channel. So looking forward to that. Yeah, big plug for that one. Don't start watching it now because you're already here. So that would be silly. Also a plug for New Breakpoint. It's a video show that's being put out by Microsoft every few weeks. I've been on one, and I'm going to be hosting one in a couple of weeks' time on tabs versus spaces. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure if that's going to be a fiery debate or just a nice chat and sort of war stories about how things have gone wrong when things got mixed up. But anyway, that comes out on Thursday. Keep an eye on that. There's some great topics. So I'm involved with the community side of that, but they also do some other ones other weeks with some sort of other topics as well. And yeah, just a plug for the Microsoft Source newsletter. There is some free t-shirts here over on the desk here, so have a look there and grab one. I don't want to take any home. There's also some other stickers and other swag that have been hanging around in my bottom drawer. When I changed jobs, I had all this stuff from the user group in my drawer at the desk, which I had to take home, so I don't want to keep it now, so help me have a lighter bag on my way home tonight. Also a plug for O'Reilly. They gave us some free ebooks last month, and I think we'll do that again next month. And sometimes they even send us real books to give away as well, which is nice. So that's it from me. If you're interested in speaking and presenting to the group, I'd love to have a chat with you afterwards. Always looking for new speakers. It doesn't have to be a leading edge technology. It could be just this was something I've been working on for a while, and these are some problems I worked through, and this is how I approached it. That's just as interesting as the latest great Blazor technology that we're going to hear about tonight. So always interested in getting new speakers. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to pull the plug on my laptop and invite the guys up here to talk about Blazor. I'll give you one, but it's
Right.
Yep, that should probably work. Nice. So good. Just keep this.
Just while Sahan gets set up, just to get a bit of a feel for the room, like have we got web people here or back end people? Who's sort of front end web person? Yeah, front end who? Yeah, C#. Visual Studio 2019, VS Code, Port Power, VS 2019, did I say that? Why is it called VS 2019 if it's like the latest, greatest thing? Does anyone know that?
They're still working on 21, I guess.
Do you know that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't even heard when the next one's coming out. So.
They admitted defeat Serrata.
What was that, sorry?
They admitted defeat Serrata and then stopped developing it.
Is that right? We're stuck now. We're sort of stuck in
it's
20.
IntelliJ all the way through.
Okay. Or VS Code, I guess.
So if they're doing previews for the 2019 one, they're still advancing that rather than the next version, I guess.
I haven't done really tried that.
I don't know if we can come net 6 out here at the end of the year, Zaman, and they might rename it just because we beat it up.
Right.
I don't know for sure.
Just call it the .NET Universe.
Is it saying it?
Yep.
Came up once, but yeah.
Big shift to put all under one hat.
Can try this one maybe.
Darren, before you start, Ben and I are going to duck out a minute to get the subway. I don't want you to think we're leaving. Normally there's a back door you can sneak out of. So
Right, okay. Thanks for pre-warning me on that. Yeah. Very thoughtful.
I just didn't want anyone to follow me, that's all.
Yeah, that's right.
This is our chance.
It's coming through here.
Is it? Oh, okay. Give them a minute. They take a few seconds to figure out this.
Hopefully this will come up. Otherwise it'll be like, imagine this.
Yeah.
Go on.
We can all just gather on the laptop, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Give it a few seconds.
It works on Sahan's machine.
Yeah, got it here.
Blue screen. Here we go. Oh. There we go.
There it is.
We're away.
Let's not change anything now.
Worth waiting for.
Yep. That. Cool. Nice. So everything is working. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
All good on your side?
No,
No?
not getting that signal coming through here.
Right.
It's going straight through to the monitor, but not here.
You keep going.
It's going to be somewhat challenging.
All right. Yeah, let's kick off the presentation. So, yeah, hope everyone is settled in nicely. And today the talk is going to be about Blazor, as you already know. That's why you are here. So Blazor has been around since 2017 when Steve Sanderson wanted to run C# code in the browser, but it didn't hit prod up until about ASP.NET Core 3.1, and yeah, now we have all these prod capabilities of Blazor, and tonight's talk gonna be about giving you guys a solid ground to start working on Blazor and even to integrate with your existing application stack. First of all, we would introduce ourselves. So my name is Sahan Singh, and I work as a consultant for Telstra Purple. And this is my first .NET user group talk, so go easy on me. But this guy over here is a seasoned presenter, so I'll ask all the difficult questions from him. That's our Twitter handle, so I'll let Darren to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, sure. Darren Neimke, Telstra Purple with Sahan. Although I'm just about to move out into a new exciting journey. My Twitter handle is Diggory, and this is my favourite picture of all time. Sahan and I at a Telstra Purple event in Perth.
Good. Yeah, so there's going to be around 4 demos for tonight's talk, and we have put everything up in this GitHub repo. You can go there, you can scan this QR code and go to our GitHub repo and
even put a star. Yeah, I'll give you guys a couple of seconds if you want to scan that. You can see, yeah, people are still doing that. So we will be also putting up the slide deck there as well. And yeah, you can just clone this and run all the demos on your machine as well. So that's that. So first of all, before jumping into any code whatsoever, let's have a look at a cool demo that Darren actually came up with. I'll get that up and running first.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just while Sahan gets the demo up and running, so this will be a Blazor game that I wrote. It was based around a request at work. One of the Agile coaches wanted to have this game where he could invite people in from an Agile team and they could vote on aspects of their Agile process and look at the health of their Agile process. So like, are we doing sprints? Are they good? Are we doing estimation? Is our backlog refinement good? Etc. So in order to prototype that, I've been playing around with Blazor and I thought, Blazor is a great productivity tool. What better way than to do it with this? So Sahan's just going to load up a couple of browser windows. One on the left, you can see says create a new game. So Sahan will enter his name as like the Agile coach, create a pin code, and he'll create a game. And so at this stage, the game says waiting for the game to start. He gets a link that he can send out in an email to the other participants. They put it in their other browser. Then they get to join an existing game. That person puts in their username, as do the others, into the same pin code, and bang, when they join, now the person who created the game can start to deal the cards to begin the game. So the cards are dealt by the person who created the game. Every player is given a hand of cards with the Agile, in the actual game that we built, the cards are like backlog refinement, etc. Here I've just sort of put icons. And it says to the person who created the game, it's your turn to lead with a card. So Sahan, I'll get you to play a card, and then it says played by Sahan, and then it asks every player, can you play a matching card from your hand? In this case, the player on the right can, but let's try and play Panda. And Sahan clicks on Panda and it can't play, so of course he would then play the monkey card. When he does, the cards are matched, and the user interface in the creator's user interface on the left says, okay, we can now navigate to the next turn. Let's deal the next, let's go to the next player to have a turn. So click next turn, and now we're waiting for Darren to lead with a card. So Darren might lead with whatever card, and again, we're now waiting for the other, whoever's got the matching card to play that card. So, and this happens until you sort of play out all cards and then the game state finishes. So I guess what we're looking at here is a fairly rich sort of browser-based game. We've got multiple people connecting into the game. We've got real-time updates of the DOM. We've got business rules that we saw happening where we couldn't play a card that wasn't that turn. So, and on the back end, this is all written in C# Blazor code. We've got unit tests behind it, and we're sharing code, across the full stack. So I guess hopefully you can picture this as a rich, interactive sort of web application that we might build with something like Angular or React. And tonight what Sahan and I will do is to give you some sort of insights into how Blazor makes this kind of thing really easy to build.
All right, thanks Darren. It's a nice intro to the app. Let me close this down. Go into the presentation.
Create your demo codes.
Jump into the cool. All right. So we have divided the Blazor talk to 4 main components. First of all, we are gonna say what Blazor is about and what's the big deal with this. And also, we are going to be talking about Blazor Forms, which is a really important part when you start developing modern web applications. And After that, we are also going to be talking about JSInterop, which is a really cool concept that lies in Blazor. As always, also about third-party component support for Blazor as well. And we will dedicate some time for you guys to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll be wrapping up the presentation after that. So before moving on with what Blazor is about, let's have a understanding of the current ASP.NET Core stack, or actually a refresher on the ASP.NET Core stack. As David mentioned in his previous talk, he said this is ASP.NET Core, but now it is becoming just ASP.NET. So from this point onwards, I'm just going to be calling it ASP.NET. So if you have built any web API, MVC applications recently, I mean, you know that these are the main building blocks. Like you have your controllers, REST pages, views, and also you get these shared services like the generic hosting model, middleware pipeline, DI, and also routing, configuration, and Razor page compilation. What we want to emphasize in here is that you get all these decoupled nice services with the current ASP.NET stack. And it's just a matter of mixing and matching all these components and creating different flavors of web applications. Moving on to the next slide. As you would already be familiar with MVC applications, Razor page applications, and web API applications, they are all different flavors of applications that you can create by mixing and matching all the services that we showed earlier. For example, if you want to create a web API, you don't necessarily need any Razor pages, right? You don't have any views. And if you want to create an MVC, then you would have the Razor pages and the views and the like. So like that, Blazor is just another flavor. So we want to emphasize that it's not a completely new thing that the Blazor team came up with. It sits on top of the current ASP.NET Core stack. And also, if you use the .NET CLI now, you would see Blazor Server as well as Blazor WASM, the Blazor WebAssembly, as a new project type when you create or even scaffold a new web application. And even if you go to Visual Studio, go to New, Project, and you would also see the two options there as well. Anything you would like to add, Darren?
No.
Yeah. So I have a small question for everyone here. Do you know what's the heaviest thing in the universe? I guess from the laughs, you can guess what I'm getting at, or maybe not. I'll give you a little hint. Think about the last time you created your single-page application. Yeah, I think you might have some sort of an idea there.
Node modules.
Exactly. So on the left-hand side, we have the sun, and we have the neutron star, the black hole, even heavier than that. And go to a single-page application, scaffold that, run npm install, and you get the heaviest thing in the universe, which is the node modules folder. What we are trying to get here is for example, you have a web API application, and you create a single-page application to interact with that, right? And you'd get options like Angular, React, Vue, whatever the framework that might be. Then you bring along lots of other dependencies to get it up and running. For example, you use Webpack to do bundling or tree shaking or whatever that it might be. And again, those are two opinionated frameworks. And you also have a steep learning curve. For example, if you want to start with Angular, it has a very opinionated framework. And you need to learn that, right? And if you go down the React path, you don't get that many components in your application structure. But then again, you have to find the correct frameworks that you want to integrate with your application to create something useful. For example, some people might say, I want to integrate with Redux. Some people might argue you don't even need Redux to do state management, something like that. And also, for example, you're building your web API in C#, and you have this, single-page application written in, whatever the single page application framework, and then you need to know fair bit of JavaScript because JavaScript itself has lots of pitfalls, right? And then came along TypeScript, which kind of solves that issue. But then again, you need to learn that because it's kind of not like a copy of C# or anything like that. And apart from the stuff that you have learned, like the steep learning curve, you also have problems like when it comes to debugging. Now you need to open up a different browser or even a different stack to debug, or even sometimes you have to fall back to your trusty little console logs as well. And other than that, now you have a SPA and you have the web API. You need to somehow get them going, and you make some AJAX calls or whatever. And again, you create like a layer to marshal and unmarshal all the stuff that goes through the wire, right? And again, then comes the problem of testing. You need Karma or Jest or Jasmine or whatever the framework that it might be on the client side, and then you have a complete different framework on the server side. So you need to do a lot of context switching. So here's another joke that recently was found by Darren. I'm not gonna explain that. You will get the point of it. So there's lots of opinions and things that's in the wild about single page applications and stuff like that. So today's focus is actually to show you guys how you can kind of make yourself more productive when it comes to developing modern web applications with Blazor. All right, so I mentioned Blazor so many times, but I didn't really tell you what it is about. So Blazor comes with two hosting models, I would say, of two different flavors. One that runs completely in your browser, just like a single page application. And that's called Blazor WebAssembly. And I'll show you how it runs under the hood when we get to first demo. And there's another variant called Blazor Server. In fact, it has all the Razor components and the .NET runtime, state management running in the server side, and then it gives you like the DOM representation of that. And normally, like in a typical SPA web API kind of environment, you would have to have like AJAX calls and stuff like that to interact with the server, right? So in the Blazor Server variant, you have the Signal R connection to do all that plumbing for you. So you don't need to necessarily serialize whatever the client side object and send it through the wire, and this server now needs to deserialize it and do whatever the things from its side, and come back again with a response, and again you have to go through that entire marshalling and unmarshalling dance. So you don't have to do that with the Blazor server, and I'll also show you in the first demo what happens under the hood. So the main point or the takeaway in here is like you don't need like a whole bunch of JavaScript to now have like a single page application or have like rich web UI interaction. You can just open up like one of these Razor components and write C#, and you can have like really good UI interaction, just like the demo that Darren showed you earlier. Yeah, so little bit of WebAssembly, because some people might know what it is about, some people might not know. The main takeaway here is you don't need to know any WebAssembly at all, because the Blazor team has done all the plumbing and they have written all the runtimes for you. So you only have to worry about your business logic, writing in C# or whatever the frameworks that you use with your application. So you don't need to know anything. But WebAssembly is actually now a widely supported standard. In fact, it was published in a press release by W3C. They say that it's like the fourth web language after HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's not going to die out soon. It's not a technology that Microsoft built. It's a web standard that's out there and supported by all the major browsers, particularly for desktop as well as mobile. IE11 is not supported. That's one of the decision points that you have to make when you are building an application or Blazor application for a client. But hey, it's supported by all the other browsers. Yep, so I'm going to hand over the presentation to Darren to talk about the why behind the Blazor and talk about developer productivity in general. Over to you, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Sahan. So I'll keep this slide fairly tight because we want to get in and start having a look at some code. But really the why is it's all around productivity. So for me, the Blazor story is we want to be more productive. Sahan talked a lot about, when he was talking about node modules, about all this extra framework stuff, this marshalling, unmarshalling. So this diagram here was taken from Duncan McKenzie's blog recently. Duncan used to run MSDN and now runs Microsoft Learn and Microsoft Docs. And he wrote a great blog article about the impact of, as you maintain an application portfolio, how you have to factor in this kind of loss of productivity as you take on maintenance overhead for an application. And the example that he gave was if you're building skyscrapers and you build your first skyscraper and at the end of it you take on the maintenance of the skyscraper, and then you come to build your second skyscraper and you're much more efficient at building skyscrapers, but you've still got this maintenance overhead. And by the time you get to your fifth skyscraper, you're great at building skyscrapers, but you don't have any extra capacity left to build them because you're just maintaining them now. So what we're going to get through Blazor, through not having to deal with extra JavaScript frameworks, extra testing frameworks, extra technology that we have to upgrade, node modules, is it's extra bandwidth that we get where we're not doing unplanned or interruptions to focus on building and adding value or delivering value.
All right. So yeah, that was a nice introduction into how you can boost your productivity with Blazor. So let's jump right into our first demo and see what we get when we scaffold to Blazor applications, WebAssembly as well as a server. So I'm gonna switch to Visual Studio. Yeah. By the way, I haven't done any changes to these two projects. On the right hand side, I'm not sure if the text is clearer to you guys. Yeah, so I have two applications. One is called Blazor Counter Demo. Do you want me to increase the text size? Yeah. Just give me a sec. See if I can see it any better. Is it any better or?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So these are like the canonical example when you create a Blazor application, right? You go to Visual Studio, new project, and create a Blazor server application. You get this, and you create a WebAssembly application, and you get the this type of application. I'm not going to go into much detail because there's obviously Microsoft Docs and all the other learning resources out there. What I'm going to show you is what happens under the hood when you run these two applications and why you need to care about these two different variants of Blazor. So if I run both of these applications side by side, browser as guest, sure that worked. Yeah, let me close this. I'll keep it opened. Yeah, there it is. continue debugging. Okay, once up. So we have the server version running. Yeah, nice. So let me close this other tab, refresh everything just for the sake of it. Cool, and we hit F12 on both applications. Yeah, let's not worry, what the application does or anything. I'm just gonna show you how it's, bootstrapped and what happens under the hood. So let me go into the application tab, clear the cache. Right. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that server application for now. So we have both applications. One is a WebAssembly version on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you see the server version of the same application. So I could clear the cache of the WASM application, and let's hit F5 and see what we get there. Yeah. As you can see, if I scroll to the top, it loads up a bunch of JavaScript files like this blazor.webassembly.js, some CSS files, and a .NET.js file. And if I expand this up a little bit, sure if I can show you. Yeah, so this one says authorization DLL, and there's a whole bunch of DLLs. Another interesting thing is .NET WASM. This one over here. So just like any other single page application, it downloads the whole runtime to your browser, and that's how you can run a Blazor application within the browser's context. So as I mentioned earlier, it runs on the WebAssembly runtime. So WebAssembly is more like a subset of like the JavaScript execution runtime. It doesn't have direct access to the DOM. What the Blazor team has done is they have bootstrapped that, created like an intermediary layer between the DOM as well as the WASM runtime to give you like rich UI interaction with the DOM. For example, if I click on a button, that event would get caught within that layer, and then that would get passed down to the WASM layer. So in the WASM layer, you can run the .NET bytecode because they have the runtime, like it's a variant of a mono runtime, and that's how you get to run all this IL code in the context of the .NET WASM. So that's how it runs under the hood. You don't need to know any of this just to get started. I'm just going to give you like a introduction to how it happens from a high level point of view. So yeah, so as you have seen here, like this is because you have, we have the application running the debug mode, and if you do like trimming and as well as release version of this, you are going to see less amount of stuff in here. But again, it will download the WASM runtime, the .NET JS bootstrapping logic, as well as the Blazor WASM bootstrapping under the hood downloaded onto your browser. So don't put any secrets or anything because it's just another single page application framework. Let's head over to the server version of the same application, and let me go to the application tab, clear all the cache, and go to the network tab, clear everything here, refresh. Yeah. So there's a lot less amount here, right? Like there's only a CSS file, a bunch of CSSs. One is a bootstrap and one is the custom site CSS. What else? Blazor server.js. What happens here is when we do some kind of a UI interaction, this blazor.server.js file would intercept that and send it to the server, and also when it gets a response back from the server, it will give it back to the DOM. So that's what it does. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you'll find this interesting thing called Blazor ID. So let's check its headers. it says upgrade WebSocket. So this is a WebSocket connection that gets established when you first run the application. So this is all done for you. You don't need to do anything in here. What's more interesting is if I open this up, scroll to the top, as you can see here, so this is a WebSockets connection, right? And this is communicating with a byte stream or in the binary format. And Blazor team has created their own protocol called Blazor Pack, and that's why you get all this instantaneous interaction with the client and the server, because it does that for you. You don't need to do any AJAX calls or anything under the hood. And and as you can see, it says like binary message. It sends a bunch of keep alives to keep the connection alive, because this is a two-way data stream. And let me clear this out, and let me open up the counter example, right? Yeah, so clear this again. And if I click on this button, you see 3 requests are being made. So all these green ones are being made from the client, and all the non-green ones or the white ones are coming back from the server. So not sure if you can see this clearly. There's a bunch of binary stuff in here, and this is the decoded version. It says, the client says, dispatch this browser event, and this event has been handled. Yes, it says like mouse event and what are the X and Y values and all that kind of stuff. So that goes to the server. And what happens on the server side is it has an exact copy of this DOM representation, like a shadow DOM in React or Angular. It has this representation of a graph data structure of the DOM on the server side. So it manages the state for you. And whenever a request comes in, it says, right, so I have this structure. I need to do a diff on whatever the data packet that came in, and I want to do any change to that DOM tree we have on the server. So it does that. And after that request, if you go on to the second one, it says, right, so I have done my part. Now I'm sending back the response to you. I have done it. Now you can update your UI. So the Blazor, the blazor.server.js file then intercepts that and passes that message to the DOM to say, okay, now we can update the UI. So that's the second request, right? That's a response that we got from the server. And there's another request being made from the client to the server again. That's a third request. Says, right, I have updated my DOM, and everything is all good. So, and that's the end of the this handshake, or even the communication between the client and the server. So that's how the Blazor server works. So as we saw earlier in the WASM application, everything runs within the context of the browser. On the Blazor server, it has all the .NET stuff running on the server itself, and it connects up with the WebSocket connection through SignalR, and does this communication for you, so you don't have to worry about any of this plumbing. So it's just a matter of writing your business logic, and that's it. So that's how easy it is to get like a really good, rich UI interaction with your client and the server. If we had a quick peek at the code itself, let's see if I can stop this. Yeah, so this is the count example that we saw earlier, right? Like, I think Darren will be explaining this a little bit better when we go to the forms section. Yeah, so about 16 lines of code to do like without any JavaScript. You can write just pure C# and everything just runs in the browser as well as the server. So yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit of taste of Blazor, the two variants of Blazor applications. Now I'm going to hand over the presentation to Darren to go over the form stuff. Do you want me to
If you could try
run this? Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
The pressure's now on, now that the subs have arrived, so really better pep this up and hope that it's all contextually relevant. So yeah, great intro from Sahan there about the different types of Blazor and really how they work under the hood. What we're going to do now is just show the types of things that Blazor gives us to help build applications on top of those abstractions. The first one that I'm going to show is forms. So there's a whole bunch of components that ship with Blazor. One is called edit context, which is how we build, edit form, which is how we build forms. So yeah, we might just start by having a look at the code here. So what we've got is a Blazor page or a razor page with a route, which is just slash, so it's like the index. And then we've got this razor component, which we can see sort of on line 11 called edit form. And this is a Blazor component or a razor component. It's got an attribute of model, so we're binding an object to a model property. We're handling an event on valid submit. So again, this is a handy event for this form that we're going to have a look at, that it will only submit if the form is valid. As we look down through the definition of the form, we can see we've got some other Blazor components here, like input text, which map to an input element, and we're binding to members of the model. We've also got validation message components. These are handy ways to display any errors in the form, so we can sort of place those wherever we want. And also at the top of the form, we've got a data annotations validator. So this is another handy piece of the Blazor Forms architecture, which plugs into data annotations that we can put on models, and will automatically validate against those annotation rules. If we go down and just have a look at how much code we've got running here, very little. So we've got a model, which is an annotation forms model instance, and we just new it up. And then when we handle the valid form submission, we just kind of new it up again. So can we run this demo?
Sure.
Sahan?
So, F5.
So what we're expecting to see here is a form with some validation. We're going to make sure that the validation rules kick in. So here's our form. Let's just press submit. And we can see that the form has validated against those server-side data annotation rules. And we've got our validation messages here. So if we fill in, say, name, and as soon as we tab out, we can see that immediately that's become valid. And we've got our bootstrap sort of highlighting there. And then we've got these other rules. So an email field is required. So if we put in something that's not an email address, perhaps, it's still required because it's not valid. And again, these are all just coming off of those data annotations. So if we make the form somewhat valid,
Yep. Com.
or completely valid, now we can submit our form. So up until that point, because it wasn't valid, we couldn't have submitted the form. And when we do submit it, we go off to the server and we new up a new instance. So that's great. If we just go back to our form and have a look at where all that validation was stored. So we'll have a look at the model class, Sahan.
Yep.
Our annotations form model. And this is just a standard sort of C# class with those data annotations against it. Same sort of data annotations that we would use if we were using Entity Framework and we wanted to pass those rules through to database constraints. So we've got required, string length, we've got an email address validator, and a Blazor specific one down on the confirm email message called compare property. And that just allows us to compare one property with another and make sure that they're the same. So just want to highlight here that what we saw running in the browser, we're using server-side data annotation logic to validate in the client without a postback and without having to use any JavaScript to hook that up. So pretty cool stuff and very little code. So we want to take that a step further. So let's go to our Fluent example here. So we've got, in this example, we've got a larger form. We've got some, we've got a drop down to select the country. We've got our email address again, which has to be confirmed. And we've also got a complex set of business rules around password. So it says here that our password must be 8 to 20 characters long. So what happens if we put in 4 characters? So 4 Ds was that?
Yep.
Yep.
So this.
So we get a length constraint violation and we get a message around that. It says that we can't use spaces. So what if we put another 3 Ds and then a space? Okay, so we've got another business rules kicked in, and it says we can only have letters, numbers, and must not contain spaces. So let's back out that typo and put in another D. And so now we've got the right number of everything and we're valid. So now we've got 3 sets of rules that have run. These could be any business rules. And we've got similar rules against the other fields. So we've got to have a country, the email addresses have to match, etc. So if we tried to submit now, we'd see those other validation rules kick in. So I think what we'll do is, rather than go through this, let's just go and have a look at the difference between this form definition and the one that was using data annotations. So if we scroll to the top, we've still got an edit form, we're binding our model to an object, we're handling on valid submit. This time, instead of the data annotations validator, which is now in the box Blazor component, I've brought in a third-party component from NuGet, the Peter Leslie Morris Blazor validation validate component. There you go, what a grand sounding component. The rest of the form is kind of as per the other one. I will just highlight the input select, where we created that select list, and we're just using Razor syntax to write out a list of options here. So it's not a complex, black box sort of thing. It's just a nice simple list there. We're binding to a certain property. The rest is all the same. We've got validation messages for certain properties. We've got our email one, which we saw. The rest is all pretty much the same. And the code for this one, again, it's trivial. We've got a list of countries so that we can populate our drop down, and we've got a valid form submit. The key here is because we were using that third-party validator, so everything was the same between the two except the validator. So if we go through to the model that we're binding to on this one, which is a Fluent Forms model, we can see that this model has no data annotations on it, and it's just a POCO. But if we go down a little bit further, we've got this thing which inherits from abstract validator, and it's of that type. And so what we've got here is Fluent validation rules, which for anyone who's used Fluent validation before, it's a well-known open source library that lets you write really rich, to the nth degree rich business rules. So here we've got all of our rules on our properties, the not empties, the minimum lengths, etc. And the key point here, aside from all of the fact that we've got that client-side stuff with the server without having to write JavaScript, is that the same business logic that's running on the server is running in the client. So there's no difference in the code. We're not having to test 2 different sets of validation logic. So our XUnit tests that we would run on the server to test our mediator calls or whatever is exercising the code end to end. So when we talked about productivity before and the boost that we get in productivity, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. One test suite, one set of business logic, end-to-end C#.
Right. We jump into third-party components. So this is also going to be another demo, and I wanted to show you this slide, which is, see if I can get this up on the screen. Yeah. Still on the way. Right. I'm not sure whether you can see that, but
It's on some of them.
yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll talk you through the slide. So what I wanted to point you out was there's a very rich ecosystem for Blazor. It doesn't necessarily have to be Blazor for third-party support. You can throw in just another NuGet package that you would normally use with your ASP.NET applications. And these are actually targeted specifically for Blazor. I'm not sure if you can see, it says authentication, and there's like a whole bunch of authentication libraries there, and even cloud, CMS, IoT, and logging, as well as machine learning, and finally now with the new Maui stuff, you get the mobile bindings as well, which is on their .NET the roadmap. So yeah, let's jump into the demo, because actually also the link I have put on there, it's called Awesome Blazor. It's a GitHub repo. You can go there and check out this list. And if I jump into the Visual Studio IDE, stop this. Select third-party components. Yep, I'll just run this first and show you what I'm talking about. So this is a normal Blazor WebAssembly application that just runs in your browser, right? And we have two components here. One's called Markdown Demo. The other one is Autocomplete Demo. I'll first show you the Markdown component in here. So what happens here is you can type in your let's say hello nug. It gets converted to that. List item 1. List item 2. Yeah, yeah, so it gets converted to, like, you can type in your Markdown code in here, and that gets converted onto like HTML representation of that. So how do we do this in Blazor? So let's go back to the code and collapse everything else and go into third-party components. Right, I'll go to the index page, which is where we had the Markdown editor. So these are just your normal Razor components. And in this page, I have just plugged that in. And if you go into the component, you would see here we have a using directive saying markdig. So markdig is a popular ASP.NET library which you can download from NuGet. This is not necessarily built or targeted for Blazor. This is just you can even plug this in with your ASP.NET Web MVC or Web API application. So what I wanted to show you was you can just bring in any other NuGet package out there, plug this in here, and if you check out the markup, where we say the text area, so we are binding some variables to this text area, which is a normal DOM element, right? And you would see this bind value and bind value event attributes on that. I'll get to that later. What I really wanted to show you was the stuff that we saw earlier. It's just done with 2 lines of code. It's just a matter of managing the state with this variable called body, which is what we typed in the component on the left-hand side. And this is the preview that we get this text and pass it into like a HTML representation of that, and we use the ASP.NET's markup string library and render it in here. So that's all that's all the code that we have. I'll come back to the bind value attribute here. So as we saw earlier with Darren's demo with forms, we can bind models like this with Blazor. So it has two-way data binding, and whenever you make a change on your DOM, it would get reflected back in the code behind. And interesting thing is, if we didn't have this in here, normally when you just say @bind value, Blazor under the hood defaults to onChange event, the DOM event. So what happens is when you type something and you have to come back out of that component to see the updated value, right? But we want to override that by giving it this attribute saying bind value : event, and then we say, okay, I need to update this on input as we type in. So that's what happens. So when we type in, that's how we get the preview rendered in the next component, and that's it. That's all you have to write, just in 24 lines of code. And also another thing that you need to understand is you don't have to write your code in the same component. Like you can really decouple this, put this in a partial class, and you can just keep your markup in this component if that's your preference. Yeah, so that's a markdown component. Very easy, just matter of adding the NuGet package and yeah, using it in here. If I go back to the demo, we have another component called autocomplete demo. So with normal SPA applications or even an MVC application, you would want to integrate something like this. So if I say BMW or Ferrari, yeah, so you get the point. So you can type something in and it would show up an autocomplete list of suggestions in here. And you select one of these and it says the selected car is Ferrari F50. So going back to the code, if you look at this autocomplete component, right? Now this is a, let's say a plugin that is specifically targeted for Blazor. So this is created by a guy called Chris Santi. He has like really good stuff on his GitHub page and Blazor project. And so this is a third-party component that we brought in. We just install it through NuGet, and we can just add this component over here. So we need to give it like what the search method is, and again we need to bind whatever the model that we want to update when we select a value from the list. And also you get like customization options, like how you would want to show what what happens when you select something. So we are just gonna show the title of the car over here, and and also you can define what the template is when we show the drop-down list when we type something in that input box. So pretty basic stuff. It's just a matter of understanding how Blazor components work, and this is just another example of that. In terms of code, you don't have to worry anything about this on initialize, because this is just a local example, right? So I'm just initializing a bunch of cars in here, but yeah. Interesting thing to note here is this search cars method. So this is the method that gets called when you type something in that search box. You can have like HTTP client and do a server call or something like that, and then get back a list of cars from a different service. And this is just a POCO with two attributes in here, title and year, and that's it. This uninitialized is just a lifecycle hook. Just as you would see in any other SPA application, you have lifecycle methods, right? So this gets called whenever you run this. So whenever this component gets initialized first. In terms of state management, you only have these two variables: the list of cars and the selected car itself, and that's it. Yeah, if you are interested, you can head over to this GitHub page and have a look. Like, there's lots of customizability around this component. Like, you can define debounds and all that kind of stuff that you would normally do with a single page application that's written entirely in JavaScript or TypeScript. Yeah, so that's basically about third-party component support, and I'll hand over to Darren to talk about JS Intro.
Cool. So I'll get you just to maybe, it's great having a PA, I'll tell you, it's so good. If you could just do a .NET Watch run on the JS Interop demo. So the final demo will just be, I'll show JS Interop, which I'll explain shortly. The thing I just wanted to talk about, those components that Sahan showed, like the markdown component and the autocomplete component. Because they're standalone components, we could have just brought those easily into the forms that I showed before. Validation would have worked. We could even pass those model parameters down into those components. So we might have like the need to have a markdown text box, on all of our forms. And so we could easily just package that up as a Razor component and use it through all of our forms. Anyway, jumping into JS Interop. So this is the last service we'll talk about. We're just scratching the surface tonight. JS Interop's important because it provides a way to have interoperability between JavaScript and C# code on the server. So we can have C# calling into JavaScript running in the browser on the client, and JavaScript calling back up into the server, and calling code there. We'll just give a demo to start with. So Sahan, just in the console.
Yep.
So Sahan has run .NET Watch Run on the project folder, and we can see that the first, because we've passed watch to the .NET run command, we can see that we've got hot reload enabled on that first line under there. That's one of the new features that came out in the preview that dropped this week. So we'll just quickly demo that feature. So I've got the standard out of the box demo page here with a button. When we click on the button, so if we click on the button 4 times, we can see that our counter updates the label. So let's say we're a designer or a front-end developer and we want to do some front-end work here. So Sahan's going to put his beret on, or whatever the designers do. Goes into the solution, and we can see here under the index.razor, we've got an index.razor.css. These 2 files are linked. It's called scope styles, similar to what you would get in Angular or the SPA frameworks, where that CSS file will only be relevant for that component, so that we don't get style bleed for our application. So we've got the application running. Sahan, I'll get you to go in and change the background colour of the button to red. Press save. So now we get this live hot reload in the browser, so we get to see our design changes take place there. Much better look. We've still got the state of the page, so if we keep clicking on the button now, we haven't had the state of the page torn down. So this is a huge change for .NET, where we don't have to run our application, kind of go like that, stop it, make our changes and start it up again. But the point of this demo is more JS interop. So I think if we go, do we give the demo first, I think? Or the code?
You could do the demo.
Yeah.
Or, I'll just maximize this one.
So here we've got a list of buttons that have been rendered out. Actually, we might look at the code first. I think.
Yeah.
Would probably be easier.
Right.
So again, just a razor page with a route of demo. I'm injecting IJS runtime, which is a Blazor service. So therefore, I'm going to implement iasync disposable so that I can clean up some resources which IJS runtime and this page will use, using the disposable pattern. Going down the page, on line 7, I'm just spinning out the state of a variable called user message, and then in a loop, I'm just going to write out 10 buttons, 1 through to 10. So I'm giving them an ID of that number, ID 1, etc. In the code, we've got this IJS object reference. So if we go down on after render async, in this method, this lifecycle hook here, we're actually going to look at the first render flag that's passed in, and we're saying if this is the first time this page is being rendered, i.e. it's not a postback, let's create a .NET object reference to this page, which will give us something we can call from the client. So on the next line, I'm going to use the IJS runtime to invoke a method on a JavaScript file in the page from the server. And what that's going to do is it's going to invoke an import of a module, and it will get a reference to that module back in C# code. So I'm basically importing a JavaScript module into the page, and then I'm getting a C# reference to a client-side JavaScript module. The module is a custom module that I've written, and it's just a standard ES6 module, so I'm exporting a function called enable buttons demo. I think this could be something that comes from NPM. It might be something called the fancy buttons package, and we call enable fancy buttons, and it does fancy buttons. In our case, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a selector. We're going to use a document query selector to get all of those elements in the page, and we're going to add an event listener to them, so that when we click on any of those buttons, we're adding this behavior from client side. So we will basically throw a prompt, get some user input, and then we're going to invoke a method from JavaScript on the client back on the server to handle that click, passing back those parameters. So let's just run the demo. So here we've got our for I equals 1 to 10, our buttons. You can see that when the page loaded, we loaded the ES6 module. We said find all the buttons, add the behaviour. So when Sahan clicks on any button, it'll say, why did you click on the button? Sahan will give a reason. And we're then invoking the C# method from our NPM module and spitting it back out using C# in a label. So the important thing here is that we can think of an example where we might be migrating an old legacy application and we want to migrate it to Blazor, and we've got all this fancy front-end code that does calculations and all sorts of things. We don't want to rewrite everything. We want to ship incrementally, so we can still leverage any ES6 module and integrate that with the Blazor code. So we can have C# calling JavaScript, JavaScript's calling C#. Yeah, for any ES6 module.
In fact, this entire presentation was inspired by lots of the in-house stuff that we did, and especially the the Agile Pulse game that you showed earlier. It had some JavaScript interactions as well, right? Even the Markdown components that we showed you earlier, like we had an application with a whole bunch of business logic, client-side code, server-side code to handle like huge forms, and with by using Blazor, like integrating with Blazor and migrating that application to Blazor server, like it dramatically reduced the amount of code that we had to write, because end of the day it's gonna be just one C# file and that's it. You don't have to write a whole bunch of JavaScript and TypeScript to do marshalling, unmarshalling, and all the other testing, debugging stuff. Pretty sure there'll be lots of opinions around this. If you're coming from a single-page application background and you are a die-hard fan of single-page applications, but yeah, just give it a try and see it for yourself. So I think we have come to the end of the demos, and yeah, in conclusion, let me open this up. Get this open on the screens. Yeah, seems like almost. Right. Yeah. So yeah, we actually Blazor is a huge topic. We only scratched the surface of it. There's a whole bunch of other stuff like authentication, routing, navigation, cascading parameters, even more complex forms and validations. And also there's like lots of vendor support as well from Telerik, and also there are like good frameworks, like free open source frameworks out there, like Mad Blazor or Mud Blazor as well. And as we mentioned earlier, with the new Maui UI, like they are trying to integrate Blazor into that ecosystem as well, so that you can run or write desktop applications and mobile applications with Blazor. And yeah, it's a bunch of links that we have put together that we personally believe that they are like great resources, especially the second one. It's called Blazor Train. It's created by Carl Franklin. And yeah, if you want to get started with Blazor, just go into the second link, and it's like really good resource to learn Blazor from. And also you can go to our GitHub repo and play around with the demos that you saw today. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, if you have any questions, just direct it to him. Yeah.
Let's say tomorrow you get to build a new app for a client or maybe yourself with what you've learned about Blazor. Would you build it in Blazor, or would you build it as a start?
I would personally, if I was.
Darren, can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah. So the question is, in reality, like we've seen all this good stuff, but I've got an application I have to build tomorrow. Am I using Blazor?
Or
A server or spa? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we choose between a server application and a spa?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yep. So this is a question that Sahan and I, the types of questions that Sahan and I have been sort of grappling with a little bit. You know, there's lots of design decisions, particularly like when would you build a spa versus a non-spa? And I think that's the crux of your question.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I've just spent the last bit over a year building a spa. Then
Yeah.
after your talk, I want to go like rebuild it into Blazor because that seems like a bit easier to maintain. And some of the stuff we talk about the maintenance, it's like, oh, that sounds really interesting.
Yep.
But then if I was to build a new project tomorrow, what would I want to do if I had the knowledge of Blazor?
Yeah, so I think a lot of these, design decisions are obviously it depends. I think the big thing about spas versus server-hosted applications is really the chance to decouple your front end from your back end. And so it's really an architectural decision to say, let's say our front end might evolve every 12 months, whereas our business logic might evolve every 3 years and our database might evolve every 12 years. So if we can decouple our front ends from our business layer code, we can pass them off to different teams to develop. We can migrate them more rapidly than we might without having to disrupt our middle tier code base.
Okay.
So that's where we might choose to use a spa and an API and separate those two things. And there might be other reasons why we would build an API as well. It will add some complexity around and constraints around, authentication and secrets on the client and so forth.
Yep.
But those concerns are all pretty easy to manage these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of the key thing is whether to decouple the front end from the middle tier.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's especially creating starting from a clean slate, like a .NET application, and you want to get something up and running quickly. Blazor might be a good option for that because you just have to maintain one single code base to have your business logic and stuff, and also UI interactions. But having said that, as you said, you've been building up a spa for like a year, right? You don't want to scrap that and jump ship to Blazor because there will be a lot of trade-offs that you have to make and a lot of technical decisions as well.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the context of the problem.
Good luck with that conversation with your boss.
Oh, no. I don't plan on having it. If we're going to build like some other systems, maybe I can look into Blazor. At least as a proof of concept, it would be really interesting.
Happy to give you, more details afterwards about our experience of actually doing a real-world migration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Especially if you have .NET class libraries that you could you want to consume. Blazor would be a really good option because you can just add it to your solution and then you can consume that from Blazor.
Okay.
Yeah. We have another question.
Just with the JS interrupt, if you start manipulating the DOM with JavaScript, is that going to get out of sync with Blazor's?
Yeah, so the question here is like if we are manipulating the DOM with JavaScript, the Blazor's state tree and the local DOM get out of sync? And the answer is if we're going to do DOM manipulation, what we can do is create element references to the elements that we want to manipulate on the server and pass those down to the client and manipulate things through those element references. So we get a stable reference that Blazor understands as well. And so that's how we can keep those DOMs in sync, like the VDOM and the actual DOM. It's like an @ref. It's similar to what you do in Angular if you want an @ref element and so forth, like, that you want to work with in code.
Any other questions? With the Blazor server, how efficient have you found the session management? I imagine that if you have a lot of people using it, spinning up effectively sessions on the server, how does that actually run in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. Because with WebSockets, it's always going to be a stateful connection, and as you said, if there's like millions of people using your consuming an application, that's going to blow out the server, right? That's a question. You want to take that or?
Yeah. So it's a standard question. There's scale up and scale out answers for both the SignalR service, which will run, so you can host that in Azure SignalR. There's also scale up solutions like you might scale up your server so that you've got more available capacity to serve more. They're called Blazor circuits, which is really the in-memory representation of the state. So I guess if you're finding that, there's also the pattern where you just maintain state somewhere that's persistent. So if we're round tripping, we might make a save to a database. Therefore, if we lose state, we haven't lost everything. So yeah, there's lots of MS Docs resources on scaling
up.
Yeah, how to scale.
Scale
basically.
And, yeah, especially with app services, we have the WebSockets extension now, right? So if we go with a PaaS solution like that, it should be able to scale that for us under the hood.
Yep.
Yeah. So you don't have to manually, scale up. Scale out, scale in.
Any other questions? Are there any limitations on what .NET packages you can use in terms of version, like say .NET 5 specific stuff, or is it .NET 3.1?
Yep. So the question is there any sort of versioning issues or versioning considerations around what versions of .NET we can use in our Blazor applications? Now, I'm really bad. I'm going to throw this to you, Sandra.
Yeah, within the context of the problems that we worked on, like we didn't hit, to be honest, any issue, right, in terms of versioning, because we migrated a legacy .NET Framework application to .NET 3.1 first, and then migrated that to .NET 5, and then, ultimately to Blazor. Within that, like the roadmap of the project, we did not have any issues, unless we actually had lots of issues with the JavaScript frameworks that we used than the NuGet packages that we brought in into the application. But I didn't really see lots of issues, at least from my perspective, in terms of versioning, like 3.1 and 5.
So,
not really.
Yeah, and that our actual experience was exactly that.
Yeah.
In reality, it'll just be the same as consuming any .NET framework assembly from .NET Core. I'll still call it .NET Core for now. In that, there has to be compatibility at a net standard level and so forth about assemblies and what classes you're using. So you couldn't, for example, go and grab an old .NET framework SharePoint client DLL and consume it from what is effectively just a .NET 5 or 6 .NET Core app, because there's an incompatibility at the .NET sort of standards level. So as long as you've got that, whatever package you're consuming is compatible at the net standard level, you're fine.
Less of a question and more of a, just in addition to that last point, I did find that some APIs are missing from the Mono runtime, specifically with the WASM platform.
Cool. Yep.
There was
That makes sense.
some cryptographic libraries where you start
Yep.
the key that were missing from the WASM
Got it. Yep.
platform.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And some file providers
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, because
That's
of the
right.
limitations of the browser and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, you would
Yeah, good call.
find. That's a good call out.
Yeah, I've heard anything that would break the browser sandbox won't run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. It's going to be a brave man that asks the next question, I reckon, standing between food and more geeky questions.
Well, you thank Darren and Sahan and but yeah, do hang around and ask them more detailed, intricate questions and find a bit more about Blazor. Thanks to the people who persisted with the live stream. I think it was not always easy. Yeah, too. And I don't know if they're my relatives or. or if it was just us monitoring the stream ourselves, I'm not sure. And thanks to Tim for helping out with the stream tonight. We can only get better. I think we've set the baseline very low. Yeah, so there's some swag over here. Grab some of that. The subways are over here. There'll be some vegetarian ones if you prefer vegetarian. Any other instructions for the subways? No?
I'll spread them out, but there is a tray of vegetarian and one of wraps and two of everything else. The lady said they'd run out of ham, so apologies if you come here specifically for that ham. But I think we may have overcatered once again, so please help yourselves many times as you like, but also take some with you if you're on a walk home.
Yeah.
I want to say as well, to have access to these guys from Telstra Purple, Darren and Sahan, I know how much work they put into tonight leading into it, and for Sahan to do his first talk, but to have access to this sort of, real world information and their talent, really appreciate it as well.
While there's a bit of love going around, thanks for all your support, and also you guys for coming. Like the opportunity to speak, in Adelaide, and have local speaking opportunities is great. So appreciate you coming.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And hang around, have a chat. And then see you next month.